The tavern was quiet, though it was far from empty. Flickering candles cast long shadows on the rough wooden walls, and the smell of roasted meat and spilled wine mingled with the crisp night air drifting in. From the open windows, Alara moved among the tables with careful steps, balancing a tray of mugs filled with dark ale. Her auburn hair was tied back, and her green eyes darted nervously each time the door creaked open. Stories of the Vampire King had always circulated in hushed tones throughout the village. They said he had once ruled with an iron fist, centuries ago, and now he wandered the lands, moving among humans in secret. Some whispered that his gaze could pierce a person's soul. Others claimed he had grown bored of the mortal world, indifferent to life and death alike. Alara had heard the tales since she was a child, and yet here he was Zor would be. If tonight's rumors were true, she shook her head, trying to focus on her work. There were orders to take, mugs to refill, and customers to serve. Worrying about a legendary creature would get her nowhere. Still, a shiver ran down her spine when the tavern door opened, and the world seemed to grow colder in that single moment. He entered like a storm, moving silently, drawing all attention without a sound. A tall man, impossibly pale, with eyes that gleamed like dark jewels in the candlelight. He wore a long coat that brushed the floor and boots that made no noise against the wooden boards. Patrons froze mid-sentence, mugs trembling in their hands. Even the rowdiest men near the hearth grew still, swallowing fear as they watched him pass. Alara felt her chest tighten. Her hand shook slightly as she carried a tray toward him, trying to appear calm. She had never been this close to him, not in her wildest nightmares or daydreams. He paused at the bar, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on her. There was something in his eyes sharp, commanding, and yet lonely. He did not speak immediately. He simply looked, and Alara felt exposed, as if he could see her very thoughts. A part of her wanted to turn away, hide behind the bar, run out into the cool night, anywhere but here. But another part, the part that had always been fascinated by the stories, the dark mysteries, could not move. Kale, the Vampire King, finally spoke. His voice was smooth, like silk stretched over steel. "Wine," he said, simply. Alara quickly reached for a mug, pouring the dark liquid from a nearby cask. But something in the air warned her, a quiet instinct she could not ignore. She had heard of a plot to harm him, of enemies who would use poison to end his life. And here, in the center of the room, danger might already be present. Her heart raced. Without thinking, she took a scrap of paper and a pen from beneath the counter. She scribbled quickly, trying to keep her hand steady. "Don't drink it, and leave now." Her pulse pounded in her ears as she folded the note and, with careful timing, slipped it beneath the mug just as Kel's attention shifted toward a group of men. At the far end of the tavern, for a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, Kel's eyes flicked downward, scanning the note with that piercing gaze. Alara froze, holding her breath. The silence in the tavern felt heavier, almost unbearable. He lifted his head slowly, and in one swift movement, his hand reached for hers. The touch was gentle yet powerful, a silent claim that left her trembling. Every nerve in her body seemed to ignite, an impossible mixture of fear and fascination. He did not let go immediately. Instead, he studied her as though she were a puzzle he had been trying to solve for centuries. "Who dares warn me?" His voice was soft, but there was an edge to it, a question that demanded truth. Alara's throat tightened, but she met his gaze. She could not lie, not now. "I thought you should know. Someone wants to hurt you. I couldn't stand by and do nothing." Kale tilted his head, a shadow of a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Courage or foolishness?" His eyes softened just slightly, enough for her to feel a glimmer of warmth amid the storm of fear. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. "Maybe both," she said quietly. I had to try." The tavern seemed to hold its breath around them, the patrons watching like statues, afraid to interrupt the fragile connection forming in that moment. Kel's hand lingered, brushing against hers with a weight that felt centuries old, a force that spoke of power, history, and loneliness. "Very well," he murmured. "You have chosen your path. For better or worse." Alara's heart skipped. She had no idea what he meant, but she felt the gravity of it in her bones. This was not a man who could be ignored or easily understood. Every choice here carried weight, every gesture significant, before she could say anything more. A sudden clatter erupted from the back of the tavern. A group of shadowy figures slipped through the doorway, faces hidden beneath masks. Alara's heart nearly stopped. She recognized the signs too late. The assassins had found him. Kel's eyes darkened instantly. The playful curiosity vanished, replaced with the lethal precision of a predator who had been alive far too long to be surprised. He released her hand, but not harshly. Instead, he gave a small, commanding nod that seemed to say, "Stay close, trust me." Alara's instincts screamed at her to run, to hide, but her feet would not obey. Something inside her, the same courage that had compelled her to leave the note, kept her rooted. She needed to stay. She needed to see this through, no matter the danger. The assassins moved closer, silent as shadows, and Kel's presence shifted. Every movement became sharper, more controlled, a dance of strength and danger. He did not draw a weapon. His very presence seemed to bend the air, to warn away the intruders. Alara watched in awe as he became both storm and calm, both predator and protector. Her hand trembled, almost reaching out to him again, but she stopped herself. She could not be reckless, and yet she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, a pull that was as frightening as it was thrilling. The tension stretched between them like a wire ready to snap. Cale glanced at her briefly, a fleeting moment of acknowledgement, before turning his attention back to the shadowed figures advancing on the tavern. His eyes were cold, calculating, but beneath the surface, there was something else, a spark, almost imperceptible, that seemed to recognize her bravery and her heart. Then, in a voice that carried both warning and admiration, Cale said, "Hold fast, mortal. If you run, you die alone. If you stay, you may witness what few ever see." Alara's pulse raced. She had no illusions about what might come next. She could be crushed in an instant, forgotten by history. Yet, the thought of fleeing, leaving him to face the danger alone, seemed impossible. She took a slow, deliberate breath and steadied her hands. She would not abandon him, not now, not after the note, not after feeling the spark in his hand, the weight of centuries in his gaze. The assassin struck then, a sudden wave of movement that shattered the quiet of the tavern. Chairs toppled, mugs shattered, and chaos erupted around them. Cale moved like a shadow, fluid and unstoppable, every motion precise and terrifying. Alara stayed close, heart in her throat, her eyes following his every move. She realized, even in the midst of panic, that she was no longer simply a waitress in a quiet tavern. She was a participant in something ancient, dangerous, and extraordinary. And Cale, the legendary vampire king, had chosen to allow her presence, had chosen to acknowledge her courage and her defiance. As the dust settled and the shadows receded, Cale returned to her side, calm once more, though the intensity in his gaze had not faded. He lifted a hand, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. And for a moment, the world outside the tavern, the danger, the fear, the centuries of isolation seemed to vanish. "You dared," he said softly, almost to himself, "and yet you live." Alara swallowed hard, trying to find words, but none came. Her pulse slowed, though the adrenaline still thrummed in her veins. For the first time, she saw him not just as a monster, but as a being capable of choice, capable of connection, and capable of something she dared not yet name. The night outside stretched endlessly, dark and full of secrets, and within the quiet aftermath of the tavern, a fragile bond had been formed, one written in courage, fear, and the faintest glimmer of trust. Kel's eyes met hers once more, stormy yet unreadable. He leaned closer, his breath brushing her ear, and whispered a single word that sent a shiver down her spine: "Follow." Alara knew then that her life had changed forever, and as she nodded, silently accepting the path that lay ahead, she felt the weight of centuries pressing down upon them, both danger, destiny, and something far more profound, waiting in the shadows. The night air was colder than Alara expected, sharp against her skin as she followed Cale out of the tavern. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silver light over the cobblestone streets and whispering trees beyond the village. Shadows stretched unnaturally in every direction, twisting and curling as if alive, yet Cale moved with confidence, as though he belonged to the darkness itself. Elara kept close, her heart pounding with every step. Her mind raced with questions. Where was he taking her? Why had he spared her in the tavern? And most of all, why did a part of her feel drawn to him? Despite the danger that clung to him like a second skin, Cale walked without turning his head, his voice breaking the silence like a distant echo. "You were brave tonight," he said, calm but tinged with something she could not quite name. Few mortals would have dared intervene, even if their life depended on it. Elara swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. "I couldn't just watch them hurt you," she admitted. "I couldn't stand by while someone died." He paused, eyes glinting in the pale light. Few understand what it means to live for centuries, to carry the weight of power and loneliness. He said softly, "Courage alone is rarely enough to survive in my world." She glanced at him, noticing for the first time the faint shadow beneath his eyes, the hint of weariness in his expression. It was strange, seeing a being so powerful, so commanding, showing even the slightest flicker of vulnerability. They walked in silence for a while, the forest thickening around them. The trees loomed high, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked most of the moonlight. It felt like entering another world, a world untouched by human hands, where danger and magic mingled in the air. "Elara," Cale said suddenly, stopping in a small clearing bathed in silver light, "you do not belong in this darkness. Yet here you are, following me." I want to help," she said, her voice small but firm. "I don't know why, but I can't ignore what's happening." He studied her, his gaze lingering, intense and probing. There was a weight in his eyes, centuries of experience and sorrow pressing down on her like a physical force. And yet, in that weight, she saw something unexpected, a glimmer of something human, something longing. "Do you understand what you risk?" he asked. "Being near me is not safe. My enemies are relentless, my world merciless." Elara lifted her chin. "I understand the danger, but I also know that some risks are worth taking, even for someone like you." Cale's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Someone like me?" he murmured, as if tasting the words for the first time. "A creature cursed to walk alone for eternity?" "Yes," she said, meeting his gaze. "Even someone like you." For a moment, the forest was quiet, save for the faint rustle of leaves. The air felt heavy, thick with unspoken words, with possibilities neither of them fully understood. Cale moved closer, his presence overwhelming, yet strangely comforting. "You are fearless in ways I have long forgotten," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Or perhaps you are foolish." "Maybe a little of both," Elara admitted, a hint of a smile on her lips. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the distance between mortal and immortal seemed to shrink. There was a tension, electric and fragile, that neither could ignore. It was more than fear or curiosity, it was the spark of something neither of them had dared to hope for, something that could either save them or destroy them. The peaceful moment shattered suddenly. From the shadows, a rustling emerged, low and deliberate. Alara's pulse spiked as figures emerged, cloaked in dark fabrics that seemed to blend with the night itself. The assassins from the tavern had followed them, relentless and silent. Cale's posture shifted immediately. Every movement became precise, deliberate. He did not panic, did not hesitate. In a fluid motion, he stepped in front of Elara, shielding her with his presence. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the approaching danger. "They are faster than I expected," he murmured, voice calm but edged with warning. "We cannot fight them all here." Alara's heart raced. "Then what do we do?" Cale's eyes flickered toward a narrow path that led deeper into the forest. "We run," he said simply, "and we trust that the darkness itself will hide us." They moved quickly, Cale's long strides easily covering the uneven ground. Elara struggled to keep up, her legs burning with effort, but she did not falter. There was something about the way he moved, the quiet confidence, that made her believe they could survive this night. As they ran, Cale's voice cut through the sounds of the forest. You are more resilient than I imagined, mortal. Most would have faltered by now. Alara's breath came in ragged gasps. I'm not most people, she said, though even she was unsure why she risked so much. The chase led them to a hidden glade, where ancient trees formed a protective circle, their trunks thick and unyielding. Moonlight filtered through the leaves, illuminating a series of glowing runes etched into the stones around them. Alara's eyes widened. What is this place? She asked, awe and fear mingling in her voice. This place, Kale said, his tone softening, has protected me long before your kind walked the earth. The forest itself has seen centuries of battles, of betrayals, of survival. Alara stepped closer to the stones, tracing the glowing symbols with her fingertips. It's beautiful and strange. Almost alive, Kale nodded. It is alive, and it will protect us. If we respect it. The assassins had not yet caught up, but the tension in the air was palpable. Kale moved beside her, his presence a constant reminder of the danger and the strange intimacy of the moment. Despite the fear, Alara felt a growing trust, a fragile belief that they could face whatever came next together. You are brave, Kale said suddenly, his eyes meeting hers. Bravery is rare, even among humans, but bravery without understanding can be dangerous. I understand, she said, though her voice wavered. I want to help you survive. That's all I know. For a moment, Kale was silent, studying her with an intensity that made her feel both vulnerable and seen. Then he reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder, a gesture both protective and grounding. You are unlike anyone I have met in centuries, he said quietly. And that is both troubling and refreshing. Alara felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she held his gaze. I don't know if I'm supposed to be here, she admitted, but I am. And I won't turn back. Kale's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Then we walk this path together, he said. For now, at least. The serenity of the glade was short-lived. From the edge of the clearing, the shadows shifted unnaturally, coalescing into dark forms that moved with intent and precision. The assassins had found them, and they were not willing to give up. Kale's posture tensed, and his eyes glowed faintly with a light that made the shadows hesitate. He stepped in front of Alara again, a living barrier between her and the threat. You will need to trust me completely, he said, voice low, almost a growl. If you hesitate, you may not survive. Alara nodded, her resolve firm. She could feel the raw power emanating from him, of 4 centuries in the making. And she realized that she had already begun to rely on it, not just for survival, but for understanding, for connection. The assassins advanced, but Kale moved with a speed and grace that left them off balance. Shadows seemed to bend around him, reacting to his presence as if the forest itself obeyed him. Alara stayed close, following his lead, heart pounding with both fear and awe as the night deepened. A strange calm settled over the glade. The assassins, realizing they could not approach without great risk, withdrew into the darkness, leaving Kale and Alara standing amidst the glowing runes. Breathing heavily, Alara looked up at him. You could have destroyed them all, she said. Astonished, Kale's eyes softened, the storm within them calming just enough. I do not seek to kill unless necessary, he said. There is enough darkness in the world already, but those who threaten life must be stopped. Alara nodded, understanding more about the weight he carried. The balance between power and restraint, between fear and mercy. She realized in that quiet moment that she had glimpsed not just a king, but a being capable of choice, of change, and perhaps even of redemption. Kale extended his hand toward her again, a silent invitation. Come, he said. The night is not yet over, and there are still dangers ahead. But you have proven yourself capable. And for now, I welcome your presence. Alara took his hand, feeling the warmth of a centuries-old strength, and stepped forward beside him. Together, they moved deeper into the forest, bound by trust, courage, and the faintest spark of something neither fully understood yet. The moonlight followed them, casting long shadows behind, as if the forest itself whispered tales of the vampire king and the mortal brave enough to stand by his side. and in the quiet of that ancient glade, Alara realized that her life had changed forever. The danger was far from over, the journey just beginning, and the bond forming between them was more fragile and more powerful than anything she had ever known. The forest grew thicker as they moved deeper, shadows twisting and shifting with the movement of the wind. Every branch and leaf seemed alive, as if watching them, and the moonlight barely touched the ground. Alara's footsteps were cautious, her senses alert to every sound, every flicker of movement. Beside her, Kale walked with ease, his presence commanding the darkness itself. "Alara," Kale said, his voice low but steady, "you should know that the forest is not always kind to humans. Even the bravest can lose their way." "I can handle it," she replied, though her voice betrayed a hint of doubt. "I'm not afraid. Not while I'm with you." Kale glanced at her, a flicker of surprise crossing his pale face. Most humans did not speak with such resolve, and even fewer dared to acknowledge the danger as willingly as she did. "You are unlike anyone I have encountered in centuries," he said quietly. "Perhaps that is why I allowed you to follow." Alara felt a strange warmth in his words, though she could not tell whether it was trust, amusement, or something more. She kept close, feeling the power in him, a presence that could crush or protect with equal ease. It was terrifying and compelling. They moved through the trees, deeper into the forest's heart, where the air smelled faintly of earth and rain, and the moonlight revealed strange, glowing fungi clinging to the bark of ancient trees. Shadows danced unnaturally, yet Kale moved with such confidence that Alara began to feel a measure of safety. Despite the growing unease around them, suddenly, the forest opened into a small clearing, bathed in a pale silver light. At its center stood a large stone circle, worn and ancient, carved with symbols that glowed faintly. As if alive, Alara stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe. "What is this place?" she whispered. "This is a sanctuary," Kale said, his tone almost reverent. "It was created long before humans walked these lands. Here, the forest magic is strongest. It protects, it hides, and it teaches. Few mortals have ever been allowed within it." Alara looked around, feeling the hum of power beneath her feet, the soft pulse of something ancient that seemed to acknowledge her presence. "It feels alive," she said, reaching out to touch one of the stones. "It is," Kale said, "and it will guide us if we allow it. But the forest power is not without challenge. It tests those who enter." Before she could ask what he meant, a low, mournful sound echoed through the trees. Alara froze, heart racing. Shadows shifted along the edge of the clearing, dark shapes moving with unnatural grace. The assassins from the tavern had found them again, but this time they were different, quieter, faster, more precise. Kel's eyes narrowed, glowing faintly in the moonlight. "Stay close," he commanded. "Do not falter." Alara nodded, gripping the edge of her cloak as Kale stepped forward. The ground beneath him seemed to respond to his presence. The shadows twisted and recoiled, unsure how to approach. He did not draw a weapon. He did not need to. His very being radiated authority, centuries of power distilled into the smallest movements. The assassins advanced, but Kale was ready. With a graceful motion, he extended a hand, and the air around him seemed to ripple. Shadows twisted violently, then recoiled as if burned. One by one, the assassins faltered, unable to step closer. Alara watched in awe, realizing that Kel's strength was not just physical, it was a force that bent reality itself. She felt a mixture of fear and fascination. "You are incredible," she whispered, almost to herself. Kale glanced at her, and for a brief moment, his expression softened. "You are brave to say that," he replied, his voice carrying a faint note of admiration. "Most humans would have cowered, yet you remain." Her heart quickened, the tension between them growing with each passing second. She wanted to reach for him, to touch him again, but she knew the danger was far from over. Every movement mattered, every decision could be fatal. The assassins regrouped, circling the clearing, their shadows stretching unnaturally long. Kel's gaze sharpened, and he moved closer to Alara. "The forest will protect you, if you trust it," he said. "But you must trust me as well." "I do," she said without hesitation. though her heart pounded with the knowledge that trust alone might not be enough. Kel's lips curved into a small, fleeting smile, and he extended his hand toward her. "Then follow me," he said. They stepped into the center of the stone circle, where the glowing runes pulsed beneath their feet. The air shimmered, and for a moment, Alara felt weightless, as if the forest itself had lifted her from the ground. Kel's hand was steady, guiding her, yet there was an intimacy in the gesture that sent warmth through her chest. The assassins approached, but the forest itself seemed to rise against them. Roots snaked from the earth, forming barriers, twisting shadows that held the intruders at bay. Kale moved with precision, guiding Alara through the defensive magic of the clearing. Each step brought them closer to safety, yet closer to something deeper, something neither fully understood. "Alara," Kale said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "You are not just brave. You are extraordinary." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "I'm just trying to survive," she said. "Survival is one thing," he replied. "But you carry something else, something rare in humans. Courage, yes, but also a willingness to see beyond fear, to act for others. That is extraordinary." Her heart swelled, but she kept her gaze on the shadows around them. The danger was not gone. She could feel it pressing in, but now it was mixed with something else, a connection, fragile yet undeniable, that tethered her to Kale in a way that made her pulse race. Suddenly, one of the assassins broke through the shadows, rushing toward them with unnatural speed. Kale moved instantly, stepping in front of Alara. The shadows around him flared, and the figure froze, caught in the invisible force of his presence. The forest hummed with power, and for a moment, the clearing felt suspended in time. Alara's breath caught. She had never seen anything like it. You don't even touch them," she whispered, awed. Kel's eyes met hers, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Power is not always in violence," he said softly. "Sometimes it is in control, in patience, in understanding when to act and when to wait." The remaining assassins retreated, realizing that the forest and Kale were not to be trifled with. The clearing returned to silence, save for the soft rustle of leaves and the pulse of the glowing runes beneath their feet. Alara exhaled slowly, trying to calm her racing heart. She had survived another night, guided and protected by the Vampire King. But more than that, she had glimpsed the depths of his power, the complexity of his being, and the weight of centuries he carried alone. Kale stepped closer, his hand brushing hers again. "You have seen more than most mortals ever will," he said, his voice carrying both warning and admiration. "And yet, you remain. I don't know why I stay," Alara admitted, her voice soft. "But I feel something I can't explain." Kel's gaze softened, and for a moment, the predator and the king were gone, leaving only a being capable of feeling, of longing, of connection. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "some bonds are older than time, waiting for the courage to awaken them." Alara's heart leapt. She did not fully understand what he meant, but she felt it a fragile thread connecting them, woven from fear, courage, and a spark of trust. The night stretched on, quiet and heavy with unspoken words. The forest watched, ancient and knowing, as Kale and Alara remained in the clearing, side by side. The danger had passed, for now, but the journey was far from over. And as the first light of dawn touched the treetops, Alara realized that she was no longer just a mortal caught in a dangerous world. She was part of something larger, something ancient and powerful. And her connection with Kale the Vampire King was only beginning to reveal its true depth. The forest whispered around them, secrets carried on the wind, as Kel's hand lingered near hers. A silent promise of protection, guidance, and something far more profound. Alara knew one thing with certainty: the night had changed her forever. And whatever lay ahead, she would face it not as a simple mortal, but as a witness and participant in a story centuries in the making, where danger, power, and connection intertwined in ways she could scarcely imagine. Kel's gaze met hers one last time before he turned, eyes scanning the forest. "We must move," he said. "The night is not done testing us." Alara nodded, following him into the deeper shadows, heart pounding with fear, awe, and an unspoken understanding that their fates were now intertwined. The forest closed around them, ancient and watchful, as the unlikely companions walked together into the unknown, bound by courage, trust, and the faintest spark of something neither fully understood yet something that would shape both their lives in ways the world had never seen. The deeper they moved into the forest, the heavier the air became. Mist curled around the ancient trunks of trees, softening the moonlight into silver ribbons that danced across the ground. Each step felt like walking into another world, a place untouched by time, where shadows whispered secrets and every leaf seemed alive. Alara felt her pulse quicken, the mixture of fear and awe pressing against her chest. Kale led her along a narrow path, silent except for the soft rustle of leaves underfoot. His presence was a constant, grounding her in a world that felt surreal. Even the faintest noise of snapping twig, a distant owl made her jump, yet Kale remained calm, a figure of control and power, as though the forest itself bent to his will. "Alara," he said softly, breaking the silence, "the forest tests more than your courage. It tests your heart, your choices, your willingness to see beyond fear." She looked at him, puzzled. "My heart? My choices? What do you mean?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he guided her toward a circle of stones, larger and older than the ones they had passed earlier. Each stone bore glowing runes, pulsing faintly like the heartbeat of the forest. The clearing seemed to hum with power, and Alara felt a shiver run down her spine. "This place," Kale said finally, "is older than any kingdom, you know. It remembers everything: betrayal, courage, sorrow. Those who enter are shown not just the world outside, but the world within themselves. It will test us both." Alara stepped forward hesitantly, touching one of the stones. The glow spread across her fingers, warm and vibrating with energy. She gasped, "It feels alive." Kel's eyes softened. "It is alive, and it sees more than you know. It will reveal truths you may not wish to face." Before she could ask more, the shadows at the edge of the clearing shifted. Figures emerged, assassins, cloaked and silent, moving like whispers across the misty ground. They had followed them again, relentless in their pursuit. Kel's expression darkened. "They never rest," he murmured, "and they do not forgive." Alara's heart pounded. "Then what do we do?" Kale extended a hand toward her. "Trust the forest. Trust me." She nodded, placing her hand in his. The warmth of his touch was grounding, comforting, yet it carried a weight that pressed against her chest. They stepped together into the circle of stones, where the runes flared brighter, casting long shadows across the clearing. The forest responded to Kel's presence. Roots rose from the ground, forming walls and barriers that separated them from the approaching assassins. Shadows twisted, coiling and retreating, unable to cross the protective circle. Alara's eyes widened. "It is protecting us," Kale nodded. "Yes, but this protection is not infinite. We must act carefully." The assassins tried to breach the circle, but Kale moved with fluid precision. Every gesture of his hand, every step he took, seemed to bend the air and the shadows to his will. Alara watched, awestruck, realizing that his power was not just physical, it was something ancient, something that had been shaped by centuries of experience, grief, and solitude. One of the assassins lunged, moving faster than humanly possible, but Kale was already there. A subtle movement of his hand, and the figure froze mid-step, caught in a shimmer of invisible force. Alara's breath caught. She had never seen anything like it. "You control this." With thought, she whispered. Kale glanced at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "Control is not in force alone. Control is in knowing when to act, when to wait, and when to bend the world around you to your will." Her heart thumped, caught between fear and fascination. Every moment she spent with him revealed more than power. It revealed restraint, wisdom, and a strange, lonely beauty that made her pulse race. The assassins regrouped, circling the clearing with careful, deliberate steps. Kel's gaze was steady, unflinching. "They are relentless," he said, "but not invincible." He moved closer to her, his hand brushing against hers again. "Your courage has brought you this far," he murmured. "Do not let fear break it now." Alara swallowed hard, gripping his hand firmly. I'm not afraid," she said, Though every nerve in her body screamed otherwise, Kale studied her, his stormy eyes searching her face. Most humans would have faltered long ago. You are different. You are extraordinary. Her cheeks flushed, but she kept her gaze on him. I just want to help. Kale's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. And you have more than you realize. The assassins tried again, moving faster, more coordinated than before. Kale raised a hand, and the air around them shimmered, warping like liquid. One by one, the attackers stumbled, trapped by the subtle force of his presence. Alara realized that she had never been closer to someone so powerful. And yet, she did not feel fear, only an intense, almost dizzying fascination. You are stronger than you appear, Kale said quietly, glancing at her. Not just in body, but in spirit. Alara's pulse quickened. I just follow what feels right, she admitted. Even if it's dangerous. Kale's gaze softened, and for a moment, he allowed a vulnerability to show. Most beings I have encountered in centuries would not have dared to follow. Fear rules them. Isolation shapes them. But you have chosen another path. That is rare. Her hand trembled slightly, and he reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle, grounding, yet it carried centuries of unspoken history and power. Alara's breath caught, her heart racing, yet she did not pull away. The forest around them seemed to lean closer, the mist swirling like protective arms. Kale stepped closer, lowering his voice. There are secrets in this forest, truths you may not yet be ready to face. And there are dangers beyond the shadows, unseen and relentless. Alara nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I'm ready, she said, her voice trembling only slightly. As long as you are here. Kale studied her, a mixture of surprise and something deeper flickering in his eyes. You trust me, he said, almost in disbelief. I do, she whispered, gripping his hand tighter. For a moment, silence fell, heavy and profound. The forest watched, the air thick with magic and the scent of ancient earth. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between them, a connection. Fragile yet undeniable, a spark that neither fully understood but could not ignore. Then, from the far edge of the clearing, a ripple of movement caught their attention. A figure, taller than any human, cloaked in shadows yet moving with a natural grace, emerged from the mist. Kale's posture tensed instantly. Alara, he murmured, voice low, this is more than the assassins. This is someone ancient, someone powerful. Alara's pulse quickened. Who is it? Kale did not answer immediately. Instead, he stepped in front of her, his presence a barrier, his eyes fixed on the figure approaching. We will see soon enough, he said. The figure paused at the edge of the ruins, eyes glowing faintly in the mist. There was a weight to their presence, a centuries-old authority that even Kale acknowledged with a flicker of caution. The air seemed to hum, charged with tension. As the two ancient forces faced each other across the clearing, Alara's breath caught. She had never imagined being so close to beings of such power, caught in the quiet storm of history, magic, and fate. Yet she could not look away. The pull between her and Kale was stronger than ever, fragile yet undeniable, tethering her heart to his in a way she could not yet name. Kale's hand brushed hers again, grounding her in the moment. Whatever happens next, he said, voice low and steady, we face it together. Alara nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She was no longer just a mortal caught in a dangerous world. She was part of something larger, something ancient and powerful. And the bond between her and Kale the Vampire King was only beginning to reveal its true depth. The forest held its breath as the mist thickened, shadows twisting, and the ancient figure stepped closer. Alara felt a shiver run down her spine, not from fear alone, but from the weight of destiny pressing down upon them both. Kale's eyes met hers, stormy and unreadable. Stay close, he murmured. The night is not yet done testing us. Alara's grip on his hand tightened. I'm ready, she said, even though every instinct told her to be afraid. And as the ancient figure drew nearer, the forest seemed to hold its breath, watching the mortal and the immortal face the next challenge together, bound by courage, trust, and the faintest spark of something Neither fully understood yet something that could change everything. The mist thickened, curling like living smoke around the ancient clearing. Alara's hand remained tightly in Kel's, the warmth of his touch grounding her as the figure in the shadows stepped closer. Its presence radiated power that was older than any living thing, and Alara felt the weight of centuries pressing down upon them. Kel's stance shifted, subtle but commanding. His eyes, glowing faintly, were fixed on the newcomer. "You should not have come here," he said, voice low but sharp. "This is not a place for your kind." The figure stepped into the moonlight, revealing a tall being cloaked in shadows that seemed to shimmer and move as if alive. Its eyes glowed like twin moons, ancient and unyielding. "Kale," it said, voice deep and echoing, "centuries have passed. Yet you still cling to mortal attachments. You defy the laws of your kind." Kel's jaw tightened. "I do not defy out of whim. I defy to protect." Alara felt a chill as the figure's gaze shifted toward her. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to shrink, the forest holding its breath. "And you, mortal," the figure said, "why do you meddle in affairs beyond your understanding?" Alara swallowed hard. "Because I cannot stand by while others suffer," she said firmly. "Because I chose to help him." Kel's eyes softened as he glanced at her. "And you will not regret that choice," he murmured, though the tension in his voice hinted at danger yet to come. The shadowed figure advanced, moving with a speed that made the air shimmer. "You bind yourself to the Vampire King," it said, "and in doing so, you risk everything. Mortals are fragile, fleeting. Your heart cannot endure the storms of his world." Alara's pulse quickened, but she did not let go of Kel's hand. "I do not care," she said firmly. "I choose to stand with him, no matter the cost." Kel's expression softened, and he leaned closer, his hand brushing her cheek briefly. "Your courage is extraordinary," he whispered. "Few mortals would dare speak so boldly in the face of danger." The shadowed figure's voice resonated through the clearing, carrying both judgment and warning. "Kale, your solitude was your strength. By binding yourself to a mortal, you risk everything, your power, your life, and the balance of our world." Kel's gaze hardened, glowing faintly with a light that made the shadows recoil. "I do not seek power for its own sake. I seek only to protect, to redeem what was lost." Alara felt a shiver run through her. "Redeem?" she whispered. "What do you mean?" Kel's eyes softened, and he looked at her with an intensity that made her chest ache. "For centuries, I have carried a curse," he said quietly. "A curse of isolation, of endless nights without connection. I have watched friends and allies perish, and I have walked alone, fearing that no one could endure the weight of what I am." Alara's heart tightened. She reached out, placing her hand over his. "You are not alone now," she said softly. "I am here, and I choose to stay." Kel's eyes glimmered, and for the first time, she saw a trace of hope beneath the centuries of weariness. "Then perhaps redemption is possible," he murmured. The shadowed figure moved closer, its presence oppressive, and the forest seemed to tense around them. "Redemption cannot be given freely," it said. "It must be earned through trial. Your bond is untested, Kale. Mortal, are you prepared to face what lies ahead?" Alara's grip on Kel's hand tightened. "I am," she said firmly. "I will face it with him, whatever comes." Kale nodded, his resolve strengthening. "Then we face it together," he said, stepping slightly in front of her, shielding her with his presence. The shadowed figure raised a hand, and the air shimmered with dark energy. The trees groaned, and roots rose from the ground, twisting like serpents toward them. Kale extended his hand, and the light around him flared, pushing back the shadows. The battle of wills was silent, yet felt like the earth itself trembled beneath their feet. Alara felt the energy in the clearing, a raw and ancient force that seemed to pull at her very soul. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment, letting the forest guide her. The runes beneath their feet pulsed brighter, responding to her presence as much as Kel's. "You are stronger than I imagined," Kale murmured, glancing at her. "Even mortals can shape the tides of fate." Alara opened her eyes, determination burning in her chest. "Then let us face it," she said, her voice steady. Together, the shadowed figure lunged, a blur of darkness. But Kale met it with a force that bent the air around him. The clash of power was like thunder in the clearing, and Alara felt the ground tremble beneath her feet. She instinctively moved closer to Kale, drawing courage from his presence. From the bond they had forged in the nights past, Kel's voice rang out, low and commanding. "You will not harm her." The shadows recoiled, and for a moment, silence fell, broken only by the hum of energy in the clearing. Alara realized that Kel's power was not just strength, it was the sum of centuries of wisdom, restraint, and the desire to protect, not destroy. The shadowed figure paused, its form flickering like smoke. "You have changed," it said slowly. "You are no longer the same, Kale. The mortal has awakened something within you." Kel's gaze softened, and he looked at Alara with an intensity that made her heart ache. "She has," he said simply, "and that is both my strength and my redemption." Alara's chest tightened. She had feared the danger, feared the unknown, yet standing here, with him, she felt the power of trust, courage, and love intertwining. It was a bond neither mortal nor mortal had anticipated. The shadowed figure finally stepped back, the oppressive energy fading. "Very well," it said, voice echoing like the wind through ancient trees. "You have passed the trial for now. But know this, the path ahead will test you again. Choices, sacrifices, and truths yet unseen await." Kale exhaled slowly, tension leaving his shoulders. He turned to Alara, his eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "We have survived this night," he said quietly, "but the world we walk is not yet safe. Our bond, fragile as it may be, is a start. And it is enough." Alara smiled, her hand finding his again. "I will face it all," she said softly. "With you." Kel's lips curved into a small, rare smile. "Then perhaps, for the first time in centuries, I'm not alone," he murmured. The mist began to lift, and the first hints of dawn touched the treetops. Light spilled into the clearing, illuminating the glowing runes, the ancient stones, and the bond between mortal and immortal that had been forged in fire, shadow, and courage. Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest. The night had been terrifying, yet transformative. She had faced darkness, seen the power and sorrow of a being older than time, and found a connection that transcended fear and difference. Kale turned to her, his eyes reflecting the first light of dawn. "We are bound now," he said, voice low but certain, "not just by choice, but by circumstance, by courage, and by the threads of fate that brought us together." Alara nodded, her heart swelling. "Then we face whatever comes next," she said firmly. Together, he reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, and she felt the centuries of loneliness in him, the weight of sorrow and regret, begin to lift. Together, he echoed, the word carrying the promise of protection, trust, and something deeper, something neither fully understood but could not ignore. The forest seemed to sigh, the mist retreating, and the clearing basked in the first golden rays of morning. Birds began to sing softly, and the shadows receded, leaving only the faintest echo of the dangers they had faced. Alara looked at Kale, her courage now intertwined with hope. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Kale's gaze swept across the clearing, taking in the ruins, the forest, and the fading shadows. "Now," he said quietly, "we walk forward. The trials ahead are many, but our bond fragile. Yes, but real will guide us." Alara's fingers tightened around his. "Then let's walk together," she said. Kel's lips curved into the smallest, rarest smile, and he took her hand fully in his, a gesture of trust, partnership, and promise. Together, he repeated, and for the first time in centuries, his eyes held not just power, but hope. As they walked out of the ancient clearing, the forest behind them alive with secrets and whispers, Alara realized something profound. She had faced darkness, fear, and the unknown, and she had survived. But more importantly, she had found a connection that transcended centuries, species, and the boundaries of the world she had known. The sun rose fully over the horizon, casting warm light on the forest path ahead. And as Kale and Alara moved forward side by side, the world seemed full of possibilities, challenges, and a bond that even time itself could not break. For the vampire king and the mortal who had dared to trust him, The knight's trials were over for now, but their story, intertwined with courage, redemption, and the promise of love, had only just begun.